As we were introduced, we're from a Swedish-based design agency called Ergonomidesign, and we're going to talk about performance-enhancing design today. A little bit less about materials, it's a little bit in there, but mostly about design.
You know, sometimes when people ask me what type of products I design, I say that I actually don't work with products, I work with people instead. That is our take on design, and that is well founded in the Ergonomidesign DNA. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, so today we'll talk about mainly 3 areas. First, we'll introduce something we call the E3 framework. It's about how to use physical, cognitive, and emotional ergonomics to understand users better. We'll also introduce some ways of performing design research to generate understanding and spark innovation and ideation sessions. And touch upon user experience and how this relates to process of use before, during, and after you have used a product or a service.
As I kind of told you before, for us, everything starts and ends with the users. And different users means different demands. And in this case, the different users can be not only the apparent users, but also primary and secondary users. It can be the blogger, it can be the country manager, or the saleswoman, etc.
And I think, just to add one thing to that one, when we talk about users throughout the whole presentation, and when we say user, we mean all these users. And normally when we do research, ideate, and so forth, it's taking into account all these perspectives of who actually touches or have some kind of relationship with the product.
Or try to sell the product.
Yeah.
Okay, different demands. We talk about user insight. Insight is a very, very good English word. It means that you have understood, not that you have gathered data. It means that you have understood. And understanding me leads that you as a designer can go up to some kind of empathic level where you can put yourself in the shoes of the user and be more creative and be inspired. I think that you recognize what I'm talking about. We often come across people that have the belief that user insight is the latest technology. We don't believe that really. We also believe that user insight is the latest thing that the competitors are doing. We think that user insight is focusing on the users and trying to uncover and identify real needs that people have, not the needs that we can think about, but uncovering them and use them as drivers for innovation, to inspire design. Sometimes when I'm out talking about insight, I try to give this parallel. Just because you have a 80-page PowerPoint on your desk with information does not mean that you have insight. That's so really, really important because, as I said, when you work as a designer, you want to be inspired by the things that you see. When you are inspired, you become creative. And that is what design is all about. Some people say that human factors and ergonomics and design research is about testing. It can be that also, but not really. Because in order to have something to test, you need to have designed something that's hopefully better.
So one method we use in order to uncover insights and understand how people actually go about using a product is fairly simple one, but it's surprisingly few who use it. We call it continuum or following a product use before, during, and after use. And I want to show one example where this process is applied to buying a coffee machine, just to give you some insight to what can be done in order to innovate apart from the product itself. It's very small pictures here, but I will describe what happens. If you look at the whole process of using a product, and if you extend the term usage to from when the point a consumer thinks about the need of something until it's disposed of, You can separate that into smaller parts. And in this case, we did this for buying a coffee machine. If you start at the early beginning, at the consumer perspective here, normally people start researching around the product area. And it's very interesting to see, do they do their research on the internet? Do they go around and browse in stores? Do they read magazine articles? Do they read product reviews or not? Then when they have found sort of what they like, how do they try the product? Are there online features where you can sort of mimic a behavior of the product? Do they browse in stores? Is it possible to try? And in this case, is it possible to try the coffee machine in the store? Even is the electricity connected? Can you actually make a coffee or not? Then what's the buying process? Do they buy online or do they buy in the store? When you transport it home, can you bring it on the subway or do you have to have a car? Is there a handle on the package? And then the unpacking experience. And then, of course, one very important aspect is the first time use. Do you immediately understand how to put things together, how to, in this case, load the coffee, prepare the machine, fill water, and so forth? And then in daily use, do you understand the interface, how to clean it? And then, of course, you have the serving, then cleaning and storing. And when you look at product use around with this perspective, in most cases, you find that there's a lot of other areas of innovation than in the product itself. It might be around the logistics, around how people find information, how they unpack or experience the product the first time, and so forth. So this is a method that can be used on basically any type of product or service. And if you go to the next slide. By doing this with multiple consumer segments or target groups, in this case we map the information on the wall with all the stories that people share with us, and then you can extract data and, like in this case, make a nice chart of what's the high and low points for each consumer and find general patterns of where do people have trouble in the process and where do they really like the experience. And then by focusing on all these different segments on the process, you can either ideate around how to elevate the high points even more or how to get rid of the low points, or at least try in some way to find another way to make them less cumbersome. So this is one method around use that we think is very useful.
You understand why we're showing this? I mean, product design nowadays is much more than just the product. It is the whole process. Because buying a bike is really, really simple. Or is it? Because when I go online and write in carbon bike, I get a lot of hits. So maybe the difficult thing is actually to buy it, to research it, and to understand what it's good for. All when I want to see myself riding it, because that is what I aspire to.
And what's interesting here is when you look in this perspective, you see product design, service design, interaction design merging, because you need to think of all these aspects in order to get all the touch points to work together and be understandable for the consumers.
So this is our framework now. Now we work equally much within the physical, cognitive, and emotional field. And I mean, I talked about this. Physical is still very, very important. And I would say from my side, a lot of products underperform in this area. And we know pretty much about the human body. Not everything, but in order to design good things, we know a lot. The cognitive side, much being done there, understanding. And then the emotional side, the things that you really can't write down.
And here, I mean, this is an area that's fairly new, and there's a lot of research in this area. But for us, it's relating what we do to trends, what's going on, people's backgrounds, how people interact, how they communicate with another, what sort of builds buzz for a brand, and what people just emotionally like and dislike in different features or aesthetics.
Yeah. And then we made this illustration because this is a little bit how we see it. There is a base with the physical side that we always need to deliver. And where you have a function, it should be functional and reliable. You have a cognitive level also that's kind of in the middle. That has to do with ease of use and usefulness. It's not the same thing. Just because it's easy to use does not mean that you can use it often. But the top of the pyramid is where you find pleasure, meaningfulness, and dreams and aspiration. And especially with sport products, this is where you enter. But you need to pass through the physical and cognitive side.
And if you look at many different product areas, and you sort of dissect the really best sellers, the best products that people just seem to love, they perform on all these levels. They have a basic functionality that people understand, they're useful, easy to grasp, but it also provides some pleasureness or drive towards what you dream of or aspire to. And if you use this framework and you sort of try to sort out and divide physical, cognitive, and emotional aspect, both when you do research, when you ideate, and then when you deliver your design, the likelihood of not missing anything in the chain is reduced a lot.
Exactly. I often have an example to give, because sometimes I say that some things come from the top and go down, because we're not rational when we dream about who we want to be or what we would like to do. And in my daily life, I drive a Volvo, of course, a Volvo station wagon. That comes from the bottom. Fairly functional, not as it's used to be, but reliable, it's easy to use and useful. Does not really deliver on the top part, you see. In my spare time, I have an Alfa Romeo. I have several, because you need to have several Alfa Romeos in order to drive one, if you understand what I mean. That car comes from the top, you know. And when I close my eyes here in front of you, I can smell it. But that does not deliver on the functional reliable. It's an old Alfa Romeo, very, very old. So let's return to Argon as an example. Argon is a German bike brand that was started by a guy called Frank Arnold. In 2001, I won the Red Dot for a hacksaw frame. I made a new hacksaw frame for a hand tool manufacturer. Frank Arnold sat in his office in Germany, and he saw this hacksaw frame and thought, yeah, these guys, they should know how to make a handle. And I would like to make a bike handle, so let's call them up. You see how funny life is sometimes. So since then, we have designed almost all products for Argon. They still call it German innovation, but that's their purgatory. So we just would like to, the last product that we have done for Argon is a bike saddle. So I thought I would map out the entire design process on one page here. Start with some early user research. Goes on to sketching and very, very early into prototypes. Super early into prototypes. You see, it's nearly no design as we see design. Comes later, almost at the end. But here we are on the ID and the insight level, trying to understand what makes one saddle better than the other saddle. Because the first thing that you learn when you start talking about saddles is that everyone tells you it cannot be done, because people's bottoms look so different. And sure they do. You will only have to make several saddles. Anyway, so so inspirational drawings really, really early, because the guys at Argon started getting a little bit anxious and was wondering, is this what we're going to get? So please show us what it could look like. More testing, pressure mapping, And now comes the material. A little bit material here, but here pressure mapping to choose the correct material or the correct material mix. Through design sketches and implementation and even more testing. Because Frank is very, very stubborn when it comes to one thing. He said that the only thing that can make my products to stand out and make me successful is to be best in test. Because he did the homework that Niclas talked about. He know when these hardcore or weekend warrior riders that aspire to be really good mountain bikers or road bikers, the first thing that they do is that they do a tremendous amount of research. And they read all the reviews. And it's so important when you deal with this type of products, because although it looks super nice, when you give it to a person that would like to buy it or think it's a good design, they will look at even the small minute detail and scrutinize it. Or if it's 5 gram or 2 gram or whatever.
And I think what's interesting about this case is not only the product itself, which won a lot of awards and became best in test in many tests, but it's also how the whole process has been designed, how people find the product, what information, we know what information that triggers a buy. And that has sort of been designed into all the communication material and also showing in the product those features elevated. Yeah, I think that's an important aspect.